Yes, welcome into this Photoshop tutorial brought to you by tutvid.com, and this, I hope, will be the tutorial to end all tutorials on hair selection in Photoshop and some of the techniques I use outside of the grab the quick selection tool and go select, refine mask, and or actually refine selection, refine edge, all of those different techniques to select things like very difficult to select hair. This isn't just a girl with straightened hair over a solid color background. We've got a blonde here with, there's definitely teasing and frizziness on the edge of her head. We're going to try to select as much of that as we can, drag it over to our background image, see what it looks like. We're going to move to this redhead here. She's falling out of focus. We're going to try to select as much as we can there of her hair and drag her over and see what that looks like. Again, we're going to focus on the hair part of the selection. And last but not least, we have a very challenging image here where there's, this kind of takes that teasing of hair to another level. We're going to extract all three of these and drag them all to this background and see how they interact with a background that's quite a bit different than the initial background they were taken from. So, before we jump into the tutorial, I have a course that I'm selling over on my site. It's all about how to retouch images. It's just like a conglomeration of my best tutorials on retouching. It's $27. It supports the website. You get to download all the video files and get a bunch of the PSDs and raw images and all the good stuff to go along with it. There's a link here on the screen and a link down in the description. If you buy it, you support the site and you support these tutorials, and that's super cool. But if you don't buy it, well, I still love you just as much, and there's still all these free tutorials that feel free to check them all out and share them with your friends. I love it all. So let's go and jump into this. We're going to begin here with this blonde, as I mentioned before. One of the ways, or maybe the primary way I should say, that I like to create these sort of very, very, very difficult selections is using a method called calculations. Image calculations. Now, before we get going into calculations, whenever you're dealing with a very difficult selection, it's a wise idea to begin by getting the bits of the selection that are very easy to get. And we can tell here, like, there's quite a bit of contrast along the edge of her hair here, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for contrast. Contrast is easy to select. Contrast is easy for Photoshop to detect. So this edge of her hair will probably be relatively easy. Up here will get a little tricky. That won't be too bad right in there. This right here is going to be pretty difficult right there, because you can see the color of her hair in this particular channel is almost matching to the light and color levels coming out of the background. We can try different color channels here to see if we get different amounts of contrast, and we probably will. We're just still here, we're blending now the green channels using the blend mode of multiply here in this image. We can see what we're getting. I'll just go and make sure I'm on the same layer just so there's no variation, but it's our only layer. So we can also go with the blue channel, see what that looks like. Blue channel with blue channel. That's actually not too bad. There's actually quite a bit of contrast, actually. I don't care about everything in here. In here, this is easy to select. We can easily make that solid white. The goal is to make the edge of her hair as close to solid white as we can get it, and the background as close to black or very, very, very dark gray that we can easily make black as we can. So I'm actually going to cancel out of calculations to begin with. Let's select the rest of her dress here just with quick selection. I'm going to do this very quickly. Whoop, quick selection, not the healing brush. I'm just going to quickly grab this. I don't care if it's exact. This part of the selection I'm not overly concerned with, although quick selection, as you can see, will do a pretty admirable job getting the bulk of this here. There we go. Maybe what I'll do too is grab the lasso tool, hold down shift, and just grab all of this up and through here, right? I'm not going to the edge of the hair. Our selection, or channel-based selection with calculations is going to get that stuff. I'm going to right-click within the selection, and I'm going to choose Save Selection. I'm going to save it as a new channel. I'm just going to name this Body because it's her body. Go to Channels, boom, we have our body selection. There we go, great. I'm just going to go Select, Deselect, and we can load this selection anytime we want just by Command or Control clicking on that channel. We're going to go back to our composite channel here. I'm going to hit Command or Control D to deselect once more. And let's go back to image calculations now that we've kind of taken a brief stroll through calculations. I think what I'm going to try to do is, well, let's stick with red channel. I'm going to change the blend mode to Add, because sometimes Add can give us even more. And you can see we're really getting pretty good contrast up there in the hair. Let's try different channels. Maybe we'll go green to green, and we can play with these offset numbers in just a moment. Green to green, not quite as good as the red, I don't think. Let's try blue. Blue looks like it kind of smooths things out a little bit. Maybe not quite what I want. Let's go back to red. Red was actually kind of interesting. Red on red is giving us a lot. I mean, certainly we're getting very solid whites up there. Now, offset, scale, we don't need to worry about changing scale in most cases. I like to leave it at 1. There can be a little bit of a difference that it's going to give you as far as your contrast, and there's always a difference when you're working with 8-bit images as opposed to 16-bit, but I don't want to get into that much technical minutia. Certainly not right now. Offset. If offset is set to 0, you're not really adding any light or any darkness to the image, and for all intents and purposes, the image is completely blown out. Looks pretty bad. As you drag offset down, so you can go negative 255, well, let me go negative 255, and that's going to, make it as dark as it can be when we're adding the red channel to the red channel. If you boost it to positive 255, well, we basically have solid white because, well, we know we don't need to brighten this up anymore. I'll put it to you that way. So let's drag offset down. And if you hover over the word offset, it becomes like a little scrubby slider. You just keep dragging it down. What I'm looking for is I'm looking to make the background as dark as I can make it while still maintaining the as close to solid white in the hair as I can get. I'll put it to you that way. That's actually pretty good. Negative 200. I'm going to say about negative 200. Yeah, something like that. I'm looking here at this very difficult to get area. That right there. That I know is going to be difficult right there. But the rest of it looks like it's going to come along pretty well. Maybe it'll be a little bit tough on top of her hair. Let's go ahead and create this new channel. So go ahead and hit OK. And the very first thing I'm going to do is, again, we know we don't need any of this detail out here. So I'm going to just make a little selection here around her hair. All right. Just select her hair very roughly. All right. Just like that. And then we're going to go select inverse. So we've selected everything except that little bit. And what we can do now is just fill this with black. Edit, fill, and then choose contents, black, hit OK. And all of that has just become solid black. So now we can focus on getting this, this contrast in this little area right. And again, we're not working on the layer. We're actually working on a channel. We've created this new alpha channel, all right? This is what you're seeing, this black-white, all right? I'm going to bring up the levels dialog box, Command or Control L, and let's try this. Let's try boosting the blacks a little bit. Again, I'm just keep an eye on the edge of the hair. That's what we want to keep intact and increase the contrast of the hair to the background. All right, let's boost whites now. So we're really going to make the edges of the hair pretty stinking white. Again, we know we're going to have difficulty over here. Just keep that in your back pocket. Take note of that. All right, there we go. We got blacks. I love how I get very quiet, very intense when I'm working on this. All right, hit OK. And what I want to do now is use the little trick known as brush tool plus either overlay or soft light blend mode. We're going to go overlay, reduce the opacity to something around 50. And I want to begin by painting the color black. Oh, there we go, color black. Now I'm just going to begin painting. In fact, out here, I can set the blend mode to just straight normal and just paint all of this. Well, opacity should go back to 100 as well. I can paint all of this out here, right? There's not even hair out here. Our other quick selection got all of this stuff. All right, so we can just paint over all this stuff. Solid black. We're not covering up any little wispies of hair. All right, and the key is to get it as close to, so you're just working on this edge as possible. All right, now we'll go overlay and like reduce the opacity to about 50% or so. All right, now I'm going to begin just painting in here, and I want to be careful as I get close to the hair. It's going to start trying to get rid of some of the hair detail, but it mainly is just going to paint over and intensify colors that are already there. So you can see how as I get closer to the hair here, we're really just painting away for the most part background. There is part of the hair that's going to go missing. We're probably just going to have to bring that back manually in the mask. It's one area where this is just, it's a very tough head of hair to get here. We're doing our best. We're going to click along here. See how I've got that little bit of hair up there? I really would like to preserve as much of that as possible. And we saved a little bit of it. Well, I'm going to take that back. There we go. Paint that down. I can make my brush bigger, and you can right-click and make the edges of the brush very soft, so you can just sort of dust the edges of the hair, right? Like if I click out here, I am still painting in with black, getting close to the edges of the hair. All right, that's cool. Now we can flip the foreground and background color, and we can do the same thing. I'm going to make the brush a little smaller with the actual hair by painting with white over the hair. We can intensify and thicken the bits of the hair that we get. Now, any of that kind of like dusty-looking haze is probably going to look pretty bad in your final composited image. And this, like I said, this is a very, very challenging head of hair because her hair it's a little thin, but no excuses. Let's just see how well we can make this work. And she's got this garland back here too, which is going to be tough. But let's see what we can do. Like I said, very challenging, but hey, if you can't rise to the occasion and take something on, what kind of Photoshop user are you? All right, there we go. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just going off on spiel. All right, there we go. Cool. I actually like this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the normal blend mode. I'm going to set the opacity to 100, and I'm just going to paint. I'm going to paint with white. I'm going to right-click. I don't want too much hardness on my brush. And I'm going to paint white over most of what's going on back here, mainly because I want that edge of the hair to just kind of fade back into a very solid white area. White in your channel, the white stuff is the area that is selected. So remember, with our body selection, if I Command or Control click that, you can see we're basically selecting all of this area, but I'm just going to select that and just paint in just to be sure that our two selections are in fact going to overlap. And now is the moment of truth. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to shut off our alpha channel. I'm going to Command or Control click the body selection, right? It loads that. Hold down Command or Control and also the Shift key and select the other alpha channel that we just created to select her hair. Go back and make sure you have to actually click on to select the RGB composite channel, and we have our layer here, and we're going to add a new layer mask, and it's going to automatically mask based upon our selection. Now, if you look at the edges, they look kind of rough. That's because when you get near the edges of the hair, you're going to have the matte color, which is the color that you had behind the hair. The color you had behind the hair actually shows through the hair somewhat because hair is kind of translucent. You can sort of almost see around it, if you will, because each little individual strand of hair is so fine and so detailed. One of the other things I'm noticing is this little dark bit right in here. That's going to probably be problematic and look kind of weird in the in the composite. I'm not going to worry about that right this second. We can always go in with a fine brush and really kind of brush that away, weaken the opacity, you name it. Let's just try dragging this over and see what it looks like. I'm just going to drag it, drop it in the background, and we can see that we do, in fact, we definitely need to tweak the hair. We do need to tweak the hair if it's over a blue background, if it's over a radically different background. If we move it over almost foresty looking background, you can see that it's actually kind of close to what it was. It does need a bit of cleaning up here. We do need to bring back the edge, which, by the way, we can do. Just grab the brush tool. We got our mode set to normal. Set your foreground color to white. And we can go ahead and just paint that back in. Just kind of clean that edge right up, if you will. Take some time. I'm not gonna probably get it perfectly here for the sake of preserving some time in this video because it's gonna be a somewhat long tutorial as it is. We can go ahead and just kind of clean this edge up that looks a little unnatural, but you can see we preserve a ton of that edge detail, and we can always go over this again by setting this to like soft light or overlay, white as your foreground color. I'm gonna right click, reduce my hardness a bit, and I can go and bring back some of those edge details, right, by just going over the edge of her hair. That way, I can flip, hitting the letter X, flip to my my foreground color, make it black, and I can go in and paint away any of that like dustiness, if you can kind of see that. And you can always go in just with your blend mode set to normal and just straight get rid of any like there's kind of some wild strands of hair that just kind of look a little funky. Now, because of the angle of her head, it just is going to look maybe a little weird no matter what way you slice it. But there actually really isn't a ton of hair up in that part of her head. In fact, if we shut the mask off, we can see, yeah, there definitely are some wispies and things like that. We turn it back to our masked image, and maybe we cut away a little bit too much of that in hindsight. But again, I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on just this one image. Just know, very, very difficult image to go ahead and cut the hair out of. A lot of times, and I got to tell you, a lot of times, brunettes and blondes, especially over a lighter blondes over like a lighter forest background are going to be very, very difficult to cut out, and brunettes or redheads over like a standard / dark background of kind of normal foliage, trees, grass, things like that. It's just going to be very, very difficult to cut them out. But there are these techniques, and if we go over and keep painting with it and adjusting the edges, eventually you're going to be able to work it out and get a really, really nice mask and preserve a ton of the hair and get an effect that's great. But obviously you can see if you bring it over the clouds, you need a lot more work to just clear away a lot of that, a lot of the matte color that's left. So just know, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different tricks, but that's our first image. Let's go ahead here to the red image, or the redhead image, excuse me, and try to cut this girl's hair out. So first and foremost, we're going to grab the quick selection tool, and we're going to just try to create a nice quick selection around her body. It's going to be interesting because we've got all this grass here at the bottom, but also because, as you can see here on her shoulder, she's starting to fall out of focus. There's a very shallow depth of field, a very wide open aperture that she was obviously photographed with, so that kind of makes edges interesting sometimes. We're going to grab the lasso tool, hold down the shift key, and just drag a nice selection up like so. All right, and now we'll right-click just as we did before and choose Save the Selection. We'll name it Body, and being saved as a new channel. If we deselect Command or Control D, we can always look over at our channels. Boom, there is our selection. Very, very rough. Again, I'm not really concerned with that part of our selection. I'm concerned with getting a good selection here on the hair. And this selection is in some ways a little bit more tricky than the blonde, right, that we worked on. In fact, I'm going to shut her layer off so we can kind of have a fresh slate to work with here. Let's go ahead and go image calculations here with her as well. What we're going to do is we're going to just try, like we used add before, add here. If I reduce the light even more, we get decent contrast, but it's really, we're kind of in a difficult situation here because you can see our background over here is very, very dark, but then up here is very, very bright. We need to select the stuff in the middle, which is what we really want, either to be solid black or solid white, so we can easily change it to solid white if it is something like solid black. Let's try a different blend mode here. Let's go with like overlay, right? So we go red, overlay. I'm not sure that looks like it'll work really well with the ends of the hair. So let's try this. We're going to get the selection for this part of the hair in just a minute. Let's get the stuff here, down here with like the strands, the ends of the hair first. Let me just reduce the opacity of that. Maybe not. Let's try multiply here. Not quite what I want. Maybe soft light. Can try a bunch of different blend modes. Soft light actually looks pretty good. Maybe I will go overlay actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Because if we go overlay, what we can do, hit OK, we can bring up, and again, we're working on this new alpha channel. Go Command or Control L to bring up levels. We're going to boost our blacks, right? Boost those blacks. I'm literally focusing on this part of her hair right here. We're going to get all of this later. Just focusing on that part. I'm going to boost the whites as well. Being very careful though, because see how the white kind of is intersecting a little bit with our hair. We want to watch that. Maybe darken everything a little bit. Yeah, we're going to darken everything just a little bit because I need to make these two bright spots a little bit darker, maybe manually. Hit OK. Let's grab the brush tool, and we're going to set the blend mode to soft light. Reduce the opacity to about 50. Make the foreground color black. Make my brush a little bit larger, and I'm just going to try to darken up some of this stuff here. So I'm trying to stay away from those little wispies of hair just as best I can, and just kind of make that darker around there. Whoop, I probably went a little bit too far there. I want to preserve some of that wispiness. Make the brush smaller, go in between them as much as I can. For the most part, having this set to soft light or overlay is going to protect you a lot when it comes to getting near the edges of the hair. Let's switch it to overlay. Overlay can be a little bit more drastic, but also sometimes protect the hair or very intricate edge a little bit better. Let's go ahead and paint over the hair with white now. All right, that's pretty good. It's actually really good. I like that. Let's make that. All right, so what we need to do is now take note. We have a good hair edge selection all the way up to like right there. There's a little loop. Let me see if that's her hair. That is her hair looping out there. So we'll allow that to remain white. Let's paint with black out here. Let's get all that to go away. Let's paint up by the loop. All right, great. All right, so now that we have that little selection created, what we're going to do is take the lasso tool, come right through there, okay? And, oh, wait, I did that wrong. Let me deselect that. We're going to come, oh, no, I didn't do it wrong. What am I thinking? We're going to come right through there. We're going to select around the hair just like that. All right, so that's the bit of this that we're preserving. So that means we can go select, inverse, and we can fill the rest of it with black. Option delete, Alt backspace on the PC, Command or Control D to deselect. All right, we've got our hair right there. Cool. Hit Command or Control L just for good measure here. We can boost the blacks a little bit more, or we can boost the whites a little bit more if we want to show a little bit more of the hair. I think I want to do that. I do want to boost the whites a little bit more. I want to be careful, though, that I don't get too much of that sort of like haziness around the edges. Hit OK. All right, so there is that part of the hair selection. Let's turn on the RGB composite layer, shut off that alpha channel. Go back to my layer. We're going to go back to calculations, and we're going to try to figure out a new calculation that works better, at least, for her hair up top. Let's try, well, let's look at green. Well, we need to make it darker, number one. So let's try the blend mode of multiply first and foremost. Let's try like green on green for multiply. Yeah, look at the contrast that that's creating for the top of her head all the way around. So maybe we can get the rest of that selection using the green with green blended with a multiply blend mode. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's try that. Hit OK. Let's go back to our channels. We've got another alpha channel here. Let's bring up levels again. I want to play with this again. And in this case, I'm trying to make her hair solid black. We're going to try to make everything around the hair white. And then what we'll do is we'll invert the entire alpha channel at the very end. You'll see what I'm saying if you don't quite understand in just a moment. So I'm going to make that pretty dark. I'm going to bring the whites up. Whoop, I don't want to bring the whites too far because you see we lose that edge. That edge is going to be very fragile and very sort of weak. So we want to be careful there. Bring the whites to like right there. Hit OK. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get rid of the rest of the image. That's just, for all intents and purposes, distracting. Remember, we got to get over to there as well. So let's just select that stuff. I'm going to go select inverse. And in this case, we need to fill the rest of this image with white. So I'm going to flip my foreground and background color. We're going to fill it with white. Why am I saying we need to fill it with white? Well, because I want the background, which is already partially white. I'm going to just make the rest of the background white, and I'm going to make the hair all black, and then I'm going to flip, I'm going to invert the channel to make all the black stuff white and the white stuff black at the very end. So let's grab the brush tool, mode, overlay, opacity 54, great. Let's start painting this stuff away here. We'll get kind of close to the edge of the hair, see how sensitive the hair is going to be. Paint it very, very gently here. Just, it's like the labor of love, you know what I mean? Labor of love. I'm using my bracket keys, by the way, to quickly size up and size down my brush tool. Just left and right square bracket keys. The bracket keys right there beneath your plus and minus keys on your keyboard. All right, here's where it's going to get very, very sensitive. All the way up here where the hair and the background almost meet. All right, let's flip our foreground and background colors. Paint with black here. I'm going to really try to intensify the hair. I'm going to be pretty aggressive with it. There we go. And then I'm going to go back to white. I'm just using the letter X to flip between foreground and background very quickly. All right, you can see there, that's just going to be a very rough edge, and there's maybe nothing we can really do about it. We're going to have to go in manually probably with our brush and just soften things up where they can be softened up. You don't want to soften up your selections too much, though, because then it starts to really look digitized and really look fake. All right, we're going to go over this here. All right, I'm just going back and forth. White a little, black a little. Back and forth. Equal opportunity here. All right. All right, that's pretty cool. I can probably just make all of this pretty solid black, get close to the edges up there, pretty solid black. I've got some edgy stuff here. I'm not quite sure what's going on with the edge. We'll see when we actually make our selection how good or bad the edge is. And now that we have her hair selection solid black, we're just going to hit Command or Control-I, flip it. Now you can see it's, well, solid white. And I can see there's some dusty, halo-y type stuff I need to clean up. All right, so now that we have all these selections, we can turn on this this other alpha channel. We can see we're very close there. You can see there is, in fact, there's going to be something we have to adjust manually with our mask. We're going to have to paint in the edge a little bit and just make sure it meets up perfectly. With this alpha channel, though, let's paint with white, right? I'm on, I want to be on the alpha channel that we just created for her hair. Set the blend mode to normal. Opacity to 100. All I want to do is just add a little bit. Hello. Opacity 100. There we go. I just want to add, we want to right-click, make sure our brush hardness is at 100. There we go. I just want to add a little bit here so it meshes up with our original selection as close to perfectly as possible. Right? So I'm just going to go in there and just touch that just a little bit. All right, great. And actually right there so we don't have a hole in her hair. You saw a little bit sticking out. All right, great. So now we have all three of our alpha channels are going to overlap one another. So what we're going to do is we're going to begin by Command or Control clicking our initial body selection. All right, then we're going to hold down Command and the Shift key and select that detailed bit of hair there, and then Command or Control and Shift and select the thumbnail for Alpha 2, which is going to select the top of her hair, just like that. So in theory now, we have a selection that is going to select both her body and her hair, and we've had to create it in 3 parts. So we're getting more advanced with our hair selection here. Let's go ahead and create a mask by hitting the new mask icon, and we can see we have our mask created, and it's selected her. Let's try dragging her over our background image and see what we've got. Look at that. Look at how much detail we've got. Sure, it's not perfect around the top. You'd have to go and touch it up with the brush a little bit, but look at how much detail we were able to extract on the ends of her hair. Of course, down here, ignore this. The tutorial's not about this. We don't really care what that looks like down there, not right now. I'm more concerned with extracting a redhead's hair against a green foliage background. You should try to do it without calculations. It is extraordinarily difficult. So that is one of the ways that I like to go ahead and get my my selections when I know I have a background like this where one part is super bright, one part's going to be very dark. Sometimes you got to break it up. You got to do it in parts like that. So you can see There's with the green background, there's without. Do we need to clean it up a little? Of course, but pretty stinking good. So let's move on here to our last image. This one's going to be a little bit easier because she's not over any kind of crazy background, but she has a huge amount of frizz and a huge amount, well, not really frizz, it's more like teasing. The hairstylist went insane with that brush that they used to do that thing, and her hair is just bonkers. So we're going to go ahead and extract this. I'm going to zoom out just a touch here. Now what we're going to do here is once more we're going to go image calculations. It's not letting me choose calculations as you see. Why? Because I need to select the layer. So we're going to go image calculations. What we want to do is find a combination of channels, and again, all of this stuff works together for a very specific reason, but you would be bored out of your mind if I started explaining to you how the red mixes with the red, and the green mixes with the blue, and blue mixes with green, and red mixes with either one, and yada, yada, yada. The point is you can mix anything with anything. Sometimes you just got to come in here and experiment and try to play around with stuff. So let's go with red over multiply. I want her to be white, so maybe I'll invert the top red. Oh, let's try inverting the bottom red. Maybe invert them both, right? What am I thinking? And that would make her hair pretty close to being white. Blending of multiply is not working. Maybe soft light. Let's see what that looks like. See, the problem here is her hair is blending, or it's very, very close to the background color. That's not going to work. So this is a classic case of needing to use either the add or the subtract blend modes here. So let's go with, I'm feeling like subtract is what we need to use here. We can set the offset to whatever. We're going to adjust, we're going to tweak the offset in a moment, but it's going to be pretty low. In fact, I think it was at 26 when I came in. We'll probably be pretty close to that. Let's try subtracting the blue channel from the blue channel. I've noticed that a lot of times, especially when you're working with brunettes over a studio background, working in the blue channel here in calculations to get a hair selection can be very, very, very effective. So I'm going to set it to subtract, and I definitely need to darken this thing up. So in order to darken it up, of course, we're just going to drag offset down, and all I'm getting is gray. So what I need to do is I need to invert one of these channels. I know from experience I probably need to invert channel number 2 or source 2, and you can see, sure enough, there we go. I'm going to keep reducing offset. Again, I'm just looking to create as big a difference between the whiteness of the hair and the strands of hair and the darkness of the background. This is literally is going to be different for every image you do. Yeah, I mean, an offset of about 30 looks pretty good. In fact, right there, 31, 35, something like that looks good. The key is getting the hair as close to white as possible. And like I said before, the background, when you want it to be as dark as possible. So if you go to like 78, well, the hair's already been white. The hair was white back at like 31 or very close to white, but the overall background is going to be much darker. So that's where something like 30, I think, is really going to work well for us in this case. So let's go ahead and hit OK. It's going to create our new channel for us. And as we've been doing, well, we can actually do this a little bit more effectively here because we've got nothing else that we need to select. So I'm just going to grab my lasso tool and I'm going to drag all along here. I'm just going to create solid white selection as close to that edge of hair as I can get. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. I'm going to include here, I'm just holding on the shift key now with the lasso tool as you do, to add that selection. And I'm going to fill this with solid white. So I need my foreground color to be set to white, Alt, backspace, Option Delete on the Mac, Command or Control D to deselect. Now the idea is going to be fade all of this frizzy edge hair into the white of this central area. But I think something that'll help us is a good old levels adjustment. Command or Control L to bring up levels. Let's try just boosting the blacks a little bit. Look at what that's doing. That's really just pulling that right out. Boost the whites a little bit. Look at what that's doing. Now, when you're boosting the whites and even the blacks, just watch for like vignetting in the corners. That can really creep up on you, and it's going to make like the hair here a little bit more difficult to extract than just the hair right up here. So just keep that in mind. We'll darken this a little bit more like that. Look at how close. We haven't even started brushing yet. Just remember that. We're bringing this way in. Just going to really adjust it. I want to zoom in, and I'm going to look for that hair detail again. I want to make sure it's not getting too like crunchy. I don't know how to describe it. It's just like very almost pixelated, and it's not. We're still preserving very, very fine detail in the edges of the hair. That's really great. All right, we're going to hit OK. I'm going to back it out a little bit. Now we'll grab the brush tool, and we're going to go overlay, opacity of about 50. 50 is just like a nice spot for me where I feel like it's comfortable to hang out. Right click, I'm going to soften the edge a little bit, not too much, and we're just going to go ahead and start painting white over the hair. All right, now there are little strands through there. We're going to have to go in manually and just paint with white and no blend mode at all, just to make sure that we're getting, we're not going to have streaks where you can just straight see through her hair. Up here on the top of her head, we're going to need to do a little manual masking up there, but we can massage that and work our way through that. That's no big deal. Come through here. Just intensify the hair effect a little bit. Cool. Now we're going to flip. Black is our foreground color. I'm going to soften up my brush a little bit further. And I'm just going to click along the edges of the hair a little bit. I want to be very careful. I don't want to lose a lot of this detail. I don't want to mess up. I got a good thing going on here, and too much of a good thing is not always a good thing. It can be oftentimes a very bad thing. So I just want to be careful when I go along there. I can just go out here and intensify that a little bit while I'm at it. In fact, maybe what I'll do here is just set this to the blend mode of normal, and I will, once again, set that to my opacity here to 100. Excuse me. Right click, make this a little bit harder. I'm just going to go over here and just make sure all of this is solid black. Solid black is not selected at all. So that's, it's more of just, I don't want to have like some, very faint color cast over the image that I'm going to be dragging her into. All right, now what I'm going to do is zoom in with my brush tool. Grab the brush tool again, right click, go with a nice soft brush, so maybe 20% or so on the softness, down to about 200. I'm going to set it to the color white, and I'm just going to go in and I'm going to paint and really just fade these edges together. So I'm just going to create this sort of, it's got to just fade to the point where it's going to start becoming very opaque, where the hair kind of becomes these sort of individual hairs. It needs to be able to fade into that pretty much as seamlessly as possible. So even here across the top where I know I'm going to have to go and do some manual hand masking, I'm just going to run across that. I'm going to run across this stuff here, just being very careful. I have a feeling we got a pretty solid selection here, so we'll see here in a moment just what this is going to look like. And again, just very, very careful, especially here. Now this I would probably do more of a proper selection for something like that if we have a little bit of a straight run. But even right here, I mean, I feel pretty comfortable with that. Maybe I'll go soft light, reduce the opacity a little bit. Bring this up, make it a nice big soft brush, and just paint out into that area a little bit. But you can see, like if I zoom in here, all of this like little dusty looking stuff in here, that's all going to be remnants of this original gray background that is going to come through. It's not necessarily a bad thing because, again, you want that matte right behind your hair because most hair appears kind of semi-transparent. But just know, depending on the color of the background, it can get a little shady. All right, so we're going to hold down Command or Control and select this very complex selection. And in fact, actually, I'm going to deselect that. I'm going to zoom in up here. You can see we're just straight cutting off a chunk of the hair. So I've got Alpha 1 selected. I'm going to grab my brush tool, make sure the mode is set to normal. Opacity of 100 is good. I can right-click. Hardness of about 25 is great. I'm going to reduce the size of the brush to a little bit below 100 for the size of this image. And I'm going to paint with white and just clean up this edge just a little bit. We're not going to go through much more than just this. I just want it to look moderately presentable. And not completely like we're just flying out of left field here. All right, so I'm just going to paint down along that. And you can see, I mean, you take a little bit more time than I'm taking to do this. But you can see here, we've got big chunks of this image that are kind of missing, right? Well, no, they're not. They're coming through a little bit. All right, so that's great. We can paint that in, get rid of some of that, but nope, that's actually too strong. I'm not going to mess with it. Again, don't be tempted, as I just kind of fell into trying to adjust the edge of the mask. It probably is a little bit more perfect than it even looks to your eye. All right, let's Command or Control click to select that alpha mask. Let's go ahead and create a new mask by hitting the new mask icon, or of course you can always go layer mask, reveal selection. See what it looks like? Look at that detail. Let's try dragging her over into this background image. Oh, we got everything hidden already. Let's try dragging her over. I'm going to drop her into place. She's probably pretty large. Well, no, that's pretty good. But look at the detail level that we were able to capture and bring over. I mean, look at that. Of course, this could be touched up a little bit, and you can always touch it up by just selecting the mask, grab the brush tool, set it to the blend mode of soft light, reduce the opacity to 50, right? I feel like we've been through this a bajillion times now. Make that brush a little bit larger, maybe 500, 600, 700. Keep the hardness down nice and low, paint with the color black, right? And just come in here and dust away some of that stuff that looks like it's coming through, right? Just dust it right away. Oh, look at that. I mean, we have a really, really clean selection of hair that we were able to get, and this is like Frizz City, right? We've got an insane amount of teasing and just pieces of hair going everywhere, and we were able to extract that as well with calculations here in Photoshop. So from the blonde in the forest, which was just technically a very, very difficult selection, I will still rest easy knowing that was a very difficult selection. We had the redhead over forest. We were able to get her cut out by doing multiple calculations with multiple channels. And last but not least, one well-placed channel for a brunette with lots of teasing in her hair over a studio background. All three very advanced hair selections that you can create in Photoshop with the power of the very underused and very little known of image calculations feature. So, for calculations and for advanced selections of hair in Photoshop, that's it. Get it? Got it? Good. Nathaniel Dodson, tutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one.